How Easy You Are to Knead by PaigePenn. Based off of How Easy You Are to Knead by Delightful. Warning for blood and death of animals that are hunted for food. Chapter 1. The Hunt. The next few months were better, now that Virgil knew the humans weren't in fact going to kill him and take his pelt. In fact, without that misunderstanding clouding his judgment, he strongly suspected that they were attempting to induct him into their strange little pack. He stayed on the couch. Though Roman had offered to build him a bed of his own, Virgil still felt somewhat unsure of his place in the pack, and he declined. What he told them was that it brought him peace of mind to know that nothing could come through their door while they slept without him knowing. It was true, just not the whole truth. And by the time he was sure enough that he had indeed become part of his human's pack, Virgil was used to sleeping on the couch. On his second full moon with them, Virgil allowed himself to shift when he first felt the urge, and was spared the pain of holding it back. Patton insisted on sleeping beside him again each wolfy night, and the others joined them on the night of the full moon proper. It was good, Virgil thought, closing his eyes and feeling his human's hands resting on his fur, to be part of a pack. When the moon was half full and Virgil felt equally comfortable in either skin, Roman asked him if he'd like to accompany him on a hunt, eagerly explaining that he'd seen wild turkey in Virgil's woods. They left before sunrise, slipping quietly out of the house while the others were still asleep. This was different than all the times Virgil had accompanied Roman on hunts before. Then he had stayed out of the human's sight, following him protectively and secretly at a distance. Now Roman knew he was there, and while Virgil still kept an alert eye out for any threats to his human, he did so from beside him, and in human form. It wasn't long before they spotted a flock of turkey. They were eating small green things that had begun to grow up through the thin layer of snow still remaining, and they didn't seem to have noticed the hunters yet. Still, at a distance, so as not to spook the birds, Roman strung his bow. Virgil shifted into wolf form, dropping to all fours and wincing at the somewhat uncomfortable sensation of skin, muscle, and bones rearranging themselves. When he had caught his breath again, Virgil looked over at Roman. The human nodded, putting an arrow to the string and raising his bow. Virgil crouched, eyes on the birds again. Roman's first shot struck true, and the rest of the turkeys scattered in a panic. While Roman knocked another arrow, Virgil leapt forward, chasing after a startled bird. He made sure to keep to the right, while Roman fired arrows to the left, so as not to risk accidentally getting hit. When the snow and the feathers settled, they had the larger half of a baker's dozen birds. 3 had Roman's arrows sticking out of them, and the other 4's throats had been ripped out by Virgil's claws or teeth. If he had been hunting alone, as he was used to, Virgil would have ripped into the fallen prey right then, but he knew that wasn't how Roman did it. "Good work," Roman congratulated proudly, lowering his bow. He crossed to where Virgil stood, licking blood off his muzzle, and patted his shoulder. "We should do this again sometime." Virgil grinned a wolfy grin at him, and Roman added, unstringing his bow, "Would you mind gathering them together?" As Virgil dragged the carcasses into a pile, Roman took a waxed cloth from his pack and spread it on an unbloodied portion of ground. Then he began to systematically field dress the first turkey, plucking it, draining it of blood, and removing its entrails. At that point, Roman hesitated. "Do you want these?" he asked, holding up a handful of innards. Virgil nodded. He liked the taste of heart and liver. Roman tossed him the entrails, and Virgil pounced on the bloody meat, devouring it with a few snaps of his jaw. Roman put the field-dressed turkey on the waxed cloth, and they repeated this for the remaining 6 turkeys. By the time Roman had finished, it was early afternoon. The human used a handful of snow to clean the blood off his knife and his hands, whereas Virgil simply licked the remaining blood off his muzzle. Next, Roman folded and laced the waxed cloth so that the turkeys were securely contained within, and lifted the strap to his shoulder. "All right, let's go home." Virgil shifted. He needed to be able to speak in a way that Roman could understand. "That still leaves a scent trail, you know." "What?" Virgil gestured at the bundle. "That. Dragging a carcass. Your cloth thing muffles it, but you can still smell the blood on the ground. Or I can, anyway. Could lead a predator right to your doorstep." Roman looked at the bundle again. "Do you have a better idea?" he asked slowly. Virgil shrugged. "I bet I could carry it," he said. Roman looked startled. "This is easily over 100 pounds." "So?" Roman was stunned into silence. Finally he said, "Okay." dropped the strap, and stepped away from the bundle. "You're gonna have to help me get it on my back," Virgil warned before shifting again. He lay down next to the bundle to make it easier, and Roman, with a not inconsiderable amount of effort, hoisted it up onto Virgil's back. Virgil stood, and the turkeys immediately fell off again on the other side. They both stared at the fallen bundle for several seconds. Then Roman said, "What if we did it crosswise instead of lengthwise?" Virgil lay down again, and Roman once more heaved the bundle of turkeys onto his back, this time lying across his shoulders. When Virgil stood, they stayed in place, and Roman grinned. "All right." He took a step towards home, and then hesitated. "I think I'm going to stabilize it on the way back, just in case." Roman put a hand on the bundle to hold it steady, and they started for home together. Virgil didn't like how the added weight made his forepaws sink a bit more deeply into the snow, and what portions of the ground were soft, but he didn't complain. This was still better than leaving a trail of blood scent on the ground for any opportunistic predator to follow right back to his pack's home. Not that such a thing had happened yet in the months his humans had lived there. The bear hadn't been attracted, merely wandering through, he was sure. But he didn't want this time to be the first. Back at the house, they went not to the cabin, but to the hunter's shed next to it. There, Roman helped Virgil to dump the bundle more or less gracelessly onto the workbench by the window, opened it up, and hung all but one of the turkeys on the hooks. "I'll be a while," Roman said, holding out the last turkey towards Virgil. "Would you take this to the kitchen, please? Patton wanted to cook it for dinner." Virgil shifted again, taking the bird. He had a feeling Patton wouldn't be too eager to accept a turkey carried in a wolf's mouth, even if that wolf was Virgil. Careful not to let it drip on the floor, Virgil carried the turkey inside. Their other two packmates were in the living room, and as Virgil opened up the door, Patton got up. Virgil lifted the carcass proudly. "I killed this for you," he said. It had claw marks, not an arrow wound, so he was sure of this. Patton grinned. "Good job," he praised. "Would you help me get it into the pot?" Virgil nodded, following Patton into the kitchen. There was already a large black pot out, and after a quick glance at Patton to confirm that this was the right pot, Virgil put the turkey inside. He stepped back to let Patton do whatever he was going to do with it, absently licking his fingers. Patton looked startled. "Don't you want to wash your hands instead?" Virgil shook his head. He was a shifter, after all. He could handle raw meat. "Well, okay," Patton said hesitantly, "but wash them before you touch anything else, please." "Fine." Patton smiled again, moving the pot over to the stove and lighting it. "Have you ever had cooked turkey before?" he asked. Virgil thought, "Have you fed me turkey yet?" "No." "Then no." "Well, you're in for a treat." Patton filled a mixing bowl with water and poured it over the turkey. "It's pretty good." He put a lid on the pot and grinned again. "Simple, too. Pretty much just gotta let it sit for a few hours." Virgil nodded. "Did you have lunch?" Patton asked suddenly. "No," Virgil admitted. He and Roman had eaten a quick breakfast before they set out, and Roman had shared some jerky with him on the way to where they'd found their prey, and of course he'd had the entrails of 7 turkeys, but he hadn't quite had lunch. Patton frowned. "Can't have that," he said. "Wash up and I'll make you something. What are you hungry for?" Virgil tried to protest, but somehow he ended up on his couch again with a blanket wrapped comfortably around his shoulders, a venison sandwich in one hand, and a warm mug of spiced cider in the other. It was delicious. After he had supped, Virgil fell asleep, and didn't wake again for several hours. When he did awaken, a delightful scent met his nostrils, and he quickly sat up. "Good timing," Logan commented, and Virgil looked around for him. Ah, there he was, in the doorway between the kitchen and the living room. "I was about to wake you for dinner." So that was what the smell was. Sure enough, a moment later, Patton and Roman came into the living room as well, each carrying 2 plates. Patton handed his second plate to Logan, while Roman handed his to Virgil. There was a pile of turkey meat, some of it light and some of it dark, and next to that was a mound of fluffy whitish stuff, with a depression that had been filled with a thick brown liquid. It all smelled wonderful. Roman held out a fork to him, and Virgil took it. The others settled on the furniture around him, and all began to eat. Virgil ate several pieces of meat first. It was different than raw turkey, and he found that he liked it. Next he thought he'd try the white stuff, but first he watched the others to see how they were eating it. Roman had mixed it with the brown liquid, while Patton was taking bites from the depression where the liquid was, and Logan took some from the outside and dipped it into the liquid. So, it seemed, there was no one right way to do it. Virgil decided to try Patton's method. With his fork, he scooped up a small portion that had been touching the liquid and put it into his mouth. It was strange, but good. It tasted like the turkey, too, somehow. The texture reminded him of yam, but it wasn't sweet like yam, or orange, so he was confused. "What is this?" Virgil asked. Everyone looked at him, and he indicated the strange food with his fork. "Mashed potatoes and gravy?" Logan said. Patton looked worried. "Do you not like it?" he asked. Virgil considered the dish again, and then took another bite. "I like it," he decided. "It tastes like turkey." Patton relaxed, smiling. "It's turkey gravy," he explained. Virgil ended up eating everything on his plate, and when offered seconds, ate that too. It was very good. "I like cooked turkey," he told Patton after the meal. Roman had gone to bed already, tired from hunting and cleaning their game, and Logan was currently washing the dishes, so it was just the two of them in the living room at the moment. "Good," Patton said. "Tomorrow, do you want to help me make a new meal out of the leftovers?" Virgil thought about it. He hadn't done a lot of cooking before, but he would like to spend time with Patton. "Yes,"